Dr. Amanda Mitchell's fingers hovered over the xenolinguistic interface she'd spent the last 6 months developing. The massive Varaxian warship loomed in the viewscreen before her, its crystalline surface refracting sunlight in patterns that seemed deliberately intimidating. Behind her, the crew of the diplomatic vessel Unity held their breath, waiting for her to bridge the gap between species. "You can do this, Amanda," she whispered to herself, thinking of the thousands of hours spent decoding their transmissions. She'd staked her entire career on the theory that the Varaxians' mathematical language held the key to peaceful communication. The interface translated human speech into their precise, geometric patterns, a symphony of mathematics and meaning. The first response from the Varaxian ship came as a burst of crystalline formations in their holographic display. Amanda's heart sank as she processed their reply. The translation wasn't perfect, but the meaning was clear. Submit or demonstrate value. "This is Dr. Amanda Mitchell of Earth," she transmitted back, her words converting to intricate geometric patterns. "We seek peaceful exchange of knowledge and culture. Earth welcomes dialogue with the Varaxian Empire." She added a complex mathematical proof to the transmission, something she prepared to demonstrate human intelligence. The Varaxian response was instantaneous. Their geometric patterns shifted to sharp, aggressive angles. Primitive species using borrowed mathematics. Irrelevant. Submit or face correction. Captain David Walker stepped forward, his weathered face tense. "Dr. Mitchell, what are they saying?" "There?" Amanda swallowed hard. "They're not here for dialogue, Captain. They're here to conquer. These patterns, they're not just communication. They're displaying dominance hierarchies. We're being classified as prey." The massive ship's crystal surface began to pulse with energy. Amanda's interface exploded with incoming data, threat displays, taxonomical classifications, and something that chilled her to her core: combat algorithms. "All hands, battle stations." Walker barked, but they all knew the Unity was a diplomatic vessel. Their shields were minimal, their weapons ceremonial. Amanda's fingers flew over her console, recording everything. "They're not just hostile," she transmitted to Earth Defense Command. "They're showing us exactly how they plan to attack. These patterns, they're military formations. They're so confident in their superiority, they don't even try to hide their tactical data." The first strike hit Houston without warning. On the auxiliary screens, Amanda watched her hometown disappear in a crystalline explosion. The Varaxians weren't just attacking. They were making a statement. "Uploading all tactical data," she shouted, her training kicking in despite the horror. Their attack patterns followed the same mathematical principles as their language. There's a rhythm to it, a predictable sequence. The Unity shuddered as tractor beams locked on. Amanda's hands shook as she initiated her final transmission to Earth. "This isn't just an attack," she recorded, watching the geometric patterns of the Varaxian ship shift into what she now recognized as battle formations. "This is their standard protocol for species subjugation. They expect us to break quickly. They expect us to submit. But they've made a crucial mistake." The ship's hull groaned as the tractor beams pulled them closer. Captain Walker ordered an emergency core dump, destroying all navigational data that could lead the Varaxians to Earth's other colonies. "Their entire society is based on predictable patterns," Amanda continued, encrypting her transmission with the very mathematical principles she learned from studying their language. "They think this makes them superior, but humans." She smiled grimly as she added her complete xenolinguistic database to the transmission. "Humans break patterns. We adapt. We evolve." The Varaxian ship's crystal surface began to glow with charging weapons. Amanda sent her final message. "They've shown us their playbook, Earth. Now show them why that was their biggest mistake. Show them how humans wage war." The transmission completed just as the first crystalline beam struck the Unity. Dr. Amanda Mitchell's last act was to initiate the ship's self-destruct sequence, denying the Varaxians their prize, and ensuring that Earth would have time to prepare for what was coming. The war had begun, but thanks to Amanda's sacrifice, humanity wouldn't be fighting blind. Colonel Jack Reynolds stood before the United Nations Security Council, his burned dress uniform a stark reminder of what happened in Seattle. The bandage across his face did nothing to diminish the intensity of his gaze as he faced the assembled world leaders. Behind him, holographic displays showed the smoking ruins of Houston, Shanghai, and Moscow. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation, 12 hours ago, I watched a crystalline beam cut through the Space Needle like it was paper. I saw our best missiles shatter against their shields. But that's not what I came to talk about." He paused, tapping his tablet. A new hologram appeared, Dr. Amanda Mitchell's final transmission. Before the Unity was destroyed, Dr. Mitchell did something extraordinary. She didn't just give us their language, she gave us their playbook. The geometric patterns from her transmission rotated above the council chamber. These aren't just pretty lights. This is how they think, how they fight, how they've conquered dozens of worlds. The Chinese ambassador stood up. "Colonel, we've lost contact with our entire Pacific fleet. What good is understanding their patterns when we can't even touch them?" Reynolds smiled grimly. "Because, Mr. Ambassador, predictable patterns have a fatal flaw. They can be broken." He brought up another hologram, this one showing the aftermath of Seattle's defense. "Look here. When we broke formation, when we didn't follow their expected response patterns, their shots missed. Their targeting systems are built around anticipating standard military responses. But humans," he laughed darkly, "we're anything but standard." The room erupted in overlapping voices until Reynolds slammed his hand on the podium. "We don't have time for debate. The Varaxians expect us to either submit or follow predictable resistance patterns. Instead, I'm proposing something they'll never expect: total innovation warfare." He gestured to his tablet, sending files to every leader present. The civilian sector, video games, social media, street racing, extreme sports, everything we've ever created that breaks conventional patterns. We weaponize all of it. You want us to fight an alien empire with video games? The Russian president's translator couldn't hide the skepticism in his voice. "No, sir. I want us to fight them with human unpredictability. Their entire battle doctrine is based on mathematical certainty, so we give them chaos." Reynolds brought up simulation after simulation. "Gaming companies have developed better AI than our military. Street racers understand dynamic maneuvering better than our pilots. Social media algorithms predict behavior patterns better than our best tactical computers." The U.S. president leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Colonel?" "Total integration. No more barriers between civilian innovation and military application. Every gamer, every programmer, every street racer and parkour artist becomes a potential tactical advisor. We take everything that makes humans unpredictable and turn it into a weapon." He played Dr. Mitchell's final message. "Show them how humans wage war. The Varaxians think they're superior because they've perfected their patterns over millennia. But that perfection is their weakness. They literally can't comprehend random innovation. So let's show them how humans fight when we have nothing left to lose." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Chinese ambassador stood again. "The People's Republic has a quantum computing facility in Xinjiang. It's yours. Russia's Arctic Cyber Warfare Division awaits your orders," the Russian president added. One by one, traditional enemies became allies. Resources were pledged. Barriers fell. Reynolds nodded, hiding his relief. Dr. Mitchell gave her life to show us their patterns. Now we show them ours. Or rather, he grinned, the expression making his scarred face fierce. "We show them that humans don't follow patterns. We break them." As he left the chamber, his tablet lit up with incoming data. Gaming companies repurposing their AI. Racing teams offering advanced maneuvering algorithms. Social media giants turning their behavior prediction models to military applications. The Varaxians had expected Earth to submit or fight conventionally. Instead, Humanity was about to introduce them to chaos theory in practice. The real war was about to begin. Lieutenant Kate Martinez stared at the holographic display until her eyes burned. The captured Varaxian shield technology floated before her, its crystalline structure rotating in perfect mathematical harmony. Behind her, in the vast underground facility beneath the Rockies, hundreds of engineers worked around the clock, each approaching the problem from a different angle. "You're thinking about it wrong," she muttered, remembering her mother's lessons from the auto shop. "When a force is too strong to break through, you don't push harder. You redirect it." She zoomed in on the crystal lattice structure. The Varaxian shields were perfect, too perfect. Every energy pattern followed exact mathematical sequences, deflecting attacks with precise geometric calculations. Traditional weapons couldn't breach them because they were too predictable. "Hey, Rodriguez," she called to her assistant. "Remember that street racing mod you were telling me about? The one that got banned for being too dangerous?" Rodriguez looked up from his workstation, dark circles under his eyes. "The neural feedback loop. Yeah, it kept frying people's engines because it amplified their own power against." His eyes widened. "Oh shit." Kate's fingers flew across the holographic interface. Their shields aren't just defensive. They're an expression of their whole philosophy. Perfect patterns, perfect prediction, perfect reflection. She began recoding the shield's crystalline structure. So what happens if we turn that perfection against itself? The first test nearly vaporized their lab. The second cracked the reinforced bunker walls. But the third made history. Kate stood before the Joint Chiefs a week later, her prototype humming softly. The Varaxian shields are based on their fundamental belief in pattern superiority. They don't just deflect energy. They redirect it in mathematically perfect ways. So we built this. She activated the device. A miniature shield, identical to the Varaxians, sparkled into existence. Standard shield technology, copied directly from their designs. But we added something they'd never conceive of. A feedback loop that doesn't follow their mathematical patterns. The demonstration target fired a beam at her shield. Instead of deflecting harmlessly, the energy curved in an impossible spiral, amplifying as it fed back into itself. The target disintegrated. "Their shields expect perfect geometric reactions," Kate explained, her eyes shining. "When we introduce chaotic variables, patterns they can't predict, their own defensive energy tears them apart. We're not trying to break through their shields anymore. We're turning them into weapons." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "How soon can we deploy this?" "That's the best part." Kate grinned. "We've already modified the software for every remaining orbital defense platform. The Varaxians' next attack will trigger the update automatically. Their shields will become their own worst enemy." They didn't have to wait long. The Varaxian fleet arrived exactly on schedule. Another predictable pattern. Their first shot hit Earth's supposedly vulnerable orbital grid. Kate watched from the command center as her creation activated. The Varaxians' perfect crystalline shields lit up as they always did, their energy patterns flowing in precise mathematical sequences. Then those sequences began to shift, to spiral in ways their rigid programming couldn't comprehend. The flagship was the first to go, its own shield energy consuming it in a spectacular display of chaos theory made manifest. Others followed, their perfect defenses becoming perfect destruction. The few ships that survived immediately retreated, their commanders facing something they'd never encountered, a complete breakdown of their fundamental combat doctrine. "Send them the message," Kate ordered, remembering Dr. Mitchell's final transmission. "Let them know this is just the beginning." The broadcast went out in their own geometric language. "Your patterns are your weakness. Behold true adaptation." As celebration erupted around her, Kate turned back to her workstation. The shield technology was just the beginning. Now that they understood the Varaxians' fatal flaw, their inability to comprehend unpredictability, every human innovation became a potential weapon. "Time to show them what else we can redesign," she murmured, pulling up schematics for their propulsion systems. The war was far from over, but humanity had just proven they could turn the enemy's greatest strength into their greatest vulnerability. The age of adaptive warfare had begun. Tom Wheeler wiped grease from his hands as he watched the holographic display of the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. 20 years of NASCAR engineering had taught him one thing: the fastest path isn't always a straight line. Now, as Earth Fleet's most unorthodox tactical advisor, he was about to prove that the same principle applied to space warfare. "Y'all are thinking about space wrong," he drawled, addressing the fleet commanders. "Everyone, including these crystal-loving aliens, treats it like an ocean. But it's more like a three-dimensional racetrack with no rules and infinite lanes." The display zoomed in on his modified fleet of corvettes, smaller, faster ships that traditional military commanders had dismissed as ineffective. He'd stripped them down, reinforced their structures with racing-grade modifications, and added what he called drift thrusters. In NASCAR, when you're up against a stronger car, you don't try to outmuscle them. He highlighted the massive Varaxian patrol fleet approaching the asteroid belt. You use their size against them. Make them chase you where they don't want to go. His lead pilot, Sarah Sidewinder Jensen, a former street racer from Los Angeles, keyed in from her ship. "Track is hot, boss. They're following the exact patrol route Intel predicted." "Of course they are." Tom grinned. "Can't help themselves. Ready to show them some real driving." The modified corvettes powered up, their engines nearly silent thanks to his custom dampeners. The Varaxian fleet, moving in their perfectly geometric formation, had no idea they were about to experience something their tactical computers couldn't process. "Execute Talladega Special," Tom ordered. The corvettes shot forward, seemingly in a reckless charge. The Varaxian fleet responded exactly as predicted, shifting into their standard combat pattern. But just as their weapons charged, Tom's fleet did something impossible. They started drifting through space. Using the asteroid belt's gravitational fields and their modified thrusters, the human ships began sliding sideways between rocks, their trajectories completely unpredictable. The Varaxians' targeting systems, designed for traditional space combat, couldn't lock onto ships that were essentially power sliding through the void. "Now for the slingshot," Tom announced. "Sarah, show them why they call you Sidewinder." Sarah's corvette shot through a narrow gap between asteroids, using their gravity to whip around in a spiral that no conventional spacecraft would attempt. The maneuver put her directly behind the Varaxian flagship, in its blind spot, a concept the aliens had never needed to consider before. "Time for some pit crew precision," she transmitted, deploying the modified shield breakers Lieutenant Martinez had developed. The flagship's perfect crystalline defenses shattered as Sarah's ship drifted past, executing a maneuver that looked more like a street race than space combat. The other corvettes followed suit, each taking different racing lines through the asteroid field. The Varaxian fleet's formation broke as they tried to track the seemingly chaotic movements, their rigid tactical doctrine falling apart in the face of maneuvers born in the dirt tracks of Texas. "They're trying to calculate our pattern," Tom observed, watching the enemy ships adjust their formations. "Show them what happens when there ain't one to find." His fleet engaged their drift thrusters simultaneously, using the asteroids as gravity brakes and acceleration points. To the Varaxian sensors, it must have looked like madness. Ships spinning, sliding, and rolling through space in ways that defied conventional combat logic. Within 20 minutes, the patrol fleet was in ruins. Those ships that survived retreated in disarray, their commanders unable to comprehend how they'd been defeated by tactics that more closely resembled an illegal street race than a space battle. "Send the message," Tom ordered, his Texas drawl carrying notes of satisfaction. "Let's make sure they understand exactly what happened here." The transmission went out in both English and their geometric language. "That's how we race in Texas. Come back when you're ready for the advanced class." As the fleet regrouped, Tom was already modifying his tactical displays. "Next time," he mused, "we'll show them some dirt track techniques." Bet they'd never seen a ship pull a bootleg turn in Zerog. The age of predictable space combat was over. The era of drift fighting had begun. Dr. James Harrison sat in his dimly lit office at the Pentagon, surrounded by holographic displays of Varaxian cultural data. Dr. Mitchell's final transmission had given them more than just military intelligence. It had provided a window into the alien species' deepest fears and cultural taboos. Fear, he murmured, studying the geometric patterns that represented Varaxian religious texts, isn't universal, but the psychology of fear that transcends species. His team had spent months analyzing every scrap of data. The Varaxians' mathematical language wasn't just communication. It was a reflection of their entire worldview. Their obsession with perfect patterns wasn't tactical. It was existential. General Roberts, he called to the officer overseeing Project Echo. I think we found their breaking point. Their entire society is built on the belief that geometric perfection equals divine favor. They don't just fight in patterns. They believe those patterns make them chosen by their gods. He pulled up footage from Tom Wheeler's asteroid belt engagement. Look at their reactions when our ships broke their formations. It wasn't just tactical confusion. It was religious horror. Harrison projected a new set of geometric patterns, a corrupted version of Varaxian death prayers. Their artifacts show they believe chaos is divine punishment. So let's become their god's wrath. The first test came during a skirmish near Saturn. Before engaging, human ships broadcast Harrison's modified death prayers, geometric patterns that started perfect but degraded into chaos. The effect was immediate. 3 Varaxian ships broke formation before the battle even began. We're not just fighting their ships, Harrison explained to the Joint Chiefs. We're fighting their beliefs. Every time we corrupt their perfect patterns, we're telling them their gods have abandoned them. The psychological warfare campaign escalated. Human ships began broadcasting corrupted versions of Varaxian religious symbols. Ground forces left chaotic geometric patterns in the wreckage of defeated ships. Each message was carefully crafted to strike at the core of Varaxian cultural identity. Sir, his assistant interrupted one evening. We're picking up unusual communications from the Varaxian fleet. They're praying. Harrison leaned forward, watching the patterns flow across his screen. The aliens were broadcasting increasingly desperate religious invocations, trying to restore the perfect patterns that humanity kept shattering. Send in the next phase, he ordered. The human fleet began incorporating Varaxian religious imagery into their attack patterns. Ships would form perfect geometric formations, only to break them in ways that, according to Varaxian belief, should be impossible. It was like watching devils quote scripture. The breaking point came during the Battle of Titan. As human ships executed their chaos patterns, Harrison's team broadcast a message that struck at the heart of Varaxian faith, their own religious texts, corrupted by human unpredictability. To the Varaxian fleet, the transmission began in their geometric language. Behold the price of mathematical arrogance. Your patterns are broken. Your perfection is shattered. Even your gods now speak in chaos. The effect was devastating. Entire squadrons of Varaxian ships stopped fighting, their crews paralyzed by what they saw as divine abandonment. Others fled, refusing to face what they perceived as humanity's unholy ability to corrupt their sacred patterns. We've done more than defeat their ships, Harrison reported to the Joint Chiefs. We've defeated their conviction. They can't maintain their rigid beliefs in the face of our chaos. The data showed him to be right. Varaxian military communications were filled with religious doubt. Their perfect formations began showing signs of hesitation. Some ships refused to engage human forces altogether, seeing them as instruments of divine punishment. Sometimes, Harrison wrote in his report, the most effective weapon isn't the one that destroys ships. It's the one that destroys certainty. As reports of mass desertions in the Varaxian fleet poured in, Harrison turned to his next project. If they think this is chaos, he smiled, pulling up new cultural data. Wait until they see what happens when we start using their own prophecies against them. The war for the Varaxians' souls was turning in humanity's favor. Lisa Thompson hadn't slept in 3 days, but the former Silicon Valley prodigy didn't care. The holographic displays surrounding her workstation at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex showed something unprecedented. Real-time neural network predictions of Varaxian fleet movements, powered by code originally designed for mobile gaming. "It's beautiful," she whispered, watching as her AI systems processed combat data through algorithms originally meant for predicting player behavior in strategy games. "They're not just playing chess, they're playing every game ever made, simultaneously." Her team had done the impossible. Integrated millions of gaming AIs into a single predictive combat system. NO raid patterns, RTS unit movements, even social media behavior prediction algorithms, all repurposed for war. "Miss Thompson," General Mitchell's voice crackled over the comm. "The Varaxians are launching another assault on the Mars colony. Show me what your system can do." Lisa's fingers danced across the neural interface. Activating Gamer Protocol, Gaming-Assisted Military Emergency Response. The massive screens lit up with overlapping patterns of prediction and response. You're watching 10 million gaming AIs calculate every possible move they could make, based on every game ever played on Earth. The Varaxian fleet approached in their typical perfect formation. But this time, they faced something new. An defense grid controlled by artificial intelligence that had mastered every form of strategy humans had ever devised. "Their first move will be a diagonal strike at our southern defense line," Lisa announced, watching her predictions unfold. "It's the optimal mathematical solution, which makes it predictable. Counter with Formation Delta." The human fleet responded with a maneuver that looked like chaos, but was actually a combination of strategies from a dozen different gaming genres. Ships moved like zergling swarms from StarCraft, executed pincer movements from Total War, and employed resource denial tactics from Age of Empires. "They're adapting," one of her analysts called out. "Shifting to Formation Gamma 7. Lisa smiled. "No, they're falling into a trap. That's exactly what a raid boss does when it hits Phase 2. Her hands flew across the interface. Deploy the Destiny Gamut. The human fleet scattered in what appeared to be a panic response. The Varaxians, following their perfect tactical doctrine, moved to exploit the apparent weakness. That's when Lisa's system executed its masterstroke. In every MMO, she explained to the watching generals, there's a moment when the raid boss thinks it has the upper hand. That's when the real strategy unfolds. The scattered human ships suddenly reversed course, their seemingly random movements revealing themselves as a perfectly coordinated trap. Each ship had been positioned according to combat algorithms learned from thousands of different games, creating a strategy too complex for the Varaxians' mathematical minds to counter. Their shields are still based on perfect geometric patterns, Lisa noted, watching the battle unfold. But our attacks aren't following any pattern they can recognize. Each shot is calculated by AIs that have mastered every form of strategic combat humans have ever imagined. The Varaxian fleet, caught in a web of unpredictable attacks, began to break apart. Their perfect formations couldn't adapt to strategies born from millions of hours of human gameplay. "Send in the finishing move," Lisa ordered, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Show them what happens when you combine every winning strategy from every game ever played." The human fleet executed a maneuver that defied conventional military logic. A combination of pincer movements, feints, and counterattacks drawn from countless virtual battles. The Varaxians, unable to compute responses to strategies that simultaneously followed and broke every rule of combat, fell into disarray. As the battle ended, Lisa turned to General Mitchell. "Every game humans have ever created is a simulation of conflict and resolution. We just turned centuries of gaming into the ultimate combat eye." The general stared at the battlefield display, where the remaining Varaxian ships were retreating in disorder. What was that final attack pattern called? Lisa allowed herself a small smile. "We call it the perfect game. Because in the end, that's what this is to our AI. The ultimate strategy game, played with real ships instead of pixels. The innovation wave had become a tsunami, and the Varaxians were drowning in human creativity. Admiral Mike Sullivan stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant, studying the holographic representation of what would either be humanity's masterpiece or its final stand. Operation Checkmate had taken every innovation, every breakthrough, and woven them into a trap that played on everything they'd learned about their enemy. "Status report on the psychological package," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of 27 years of naval service. "Dr. Harrison's team confirms the corrupted geometric patterns are ready for broadcast." "Sir, they've incorporated prophecies about the Varaxians' time of unmaking into the signal." Sullivan nodded, his scared face reflected in the tactical display. "And Wheeler's drift squadrons, in position throughout the Kuiper Belt. Admiral, they're running silent, using the comets for cover. The Varaxians won't see them until it's too late." Everything hinged on timing. Lieutenant Martinez's shield-breaking technology, Thompson's gaming AI predictions, and Harrison's psychological warfare had to synchronize perfectly. The trap looked like chaos, but it was actually humanity's most coordinated attack yet. "Send the bait," Sullivan ordered. The human fleet began a seemingly desperate retreat from the Jupiter defense line. The Varaxians, true to their nature, followed the mathematically optimal pursuit course, exactly as Thompson's AI had predicted. "They're broadcasting victory prayers," his communications officer reported. "Their geometric patterns show supreme confidence." Sullivan allowed himself a grim smile. "That's about to change. Execute Phase 1. Wheeler's drift squadrons erupted from their hiding spots, performing maneuvers that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The Varaxian fleet's perfect formation wavered as they tried to track ships that moved like street racers through space. "Phase 2, Sullivan commanded. "Let's show them what real chaos looks like." Martinez's shield breakers activated, but with a twist. Instead of simply shattering the enemy's defenses, they corrupted them, turning their crystalline patterns into swirling chaos. The effect was both tactical and psychological, their perfect geometric shields transforming into what their religion considered blasphemous shapes. "They're attempting to regroup," Tactical reported, falling back to Formation Delta 9. "Now, Miss Thompson," Sullivan ordered, "show them your perfect game." The AI-driven counterattack unfolded like a symphony of destruction. Every human ship moved according to combat algorithms learned from millions of gaming sessions, creating patterns too complex for the Varaxians' rigid tactical doctrine to counter. But the true masterstroke came next. "Broadcast the final message," Sullivan commanded. "Full spectrum, all channels." The transmission began with the Varaxians' own religious texts about divine perfection, then slowly corrupted them into chaos patterns. But these weren't random. They formed a perfect mirror of the Varaxian military hierarchy, showing it dissolving into disorder. "Sir," communications called out, voice tense with excitement. "We're detecting widespread command confusion in their fleet. Their formations, they're breaking down from within." The Varaxian fleet, faced with the simultaneous destruction of their tactical doctrine, religious certainty, and command structure, began to fragment. Ships broke formation not from damage, but from their crew's inability to reconcile what they were witnessing. "This is Admiral Sullivan to all ships," he broadcast on an open channel. "Execute endgame." The human fleet moved as one, herding the fragmented Varaxian forces into a position that, in their culture, represented total subjugation. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was a cultural checkmate. "They're going silent," Tactical reported. "Multiple ships powering down, more following." "Sir, their entire command structure is shutting down." Sullivan watched as the mighty Varaxian armada, terror of 1,000 worlds, crumbled not from superior firepower, but from humanity's ability to understand and exploit their deepest cultural weaknesses. "Send the final transmission," he ordered quietly, in their language. The message was simple. "Your patterns are broken. Your perfection is shattered. Submit or face true chaos." The response came minutes later, a geometric pattern that Dr. Mitchell's original work had identified as the Varaxian symbol for unconditional surrender. Admiral Sullivan turned to his crew. "Send word to Earth. Tell them Operation Checkmate is complete. The Varaxians have experienced what they feared most, perfect order descending into perfect chaos. The breaking point had been reached. All that remained was to formalize humanity's victory." General Rebecca Anderson walked through the crystalline corridors of the former Varaxian flagship, now renamed Humanity's Response. Every surface reflected her image, multiplying her skirt dress uniform into infinite patterns, a fitting metaphor for how humanity had turned the enemy's perfection against itself. The ship's central command chamber had been converted for today's ceremony. Representatives from Earth's unified command stood alongside the defeated Varaxian High Command, their crystalline forms notably dulled, their once perfect geometric patterns showing signs of intentional disorder. 6 months ago, Rebecca began, her voice carrying across both human and alien communication channels. "You came to Earth expecting to find prey. Instead, you found something your perfect patterns couldn't compute: human adaptability." She activated the chamber's holographic display, showing Dr. Amanda Mitchell's final transmission. "This brave woman gave her life to show us your playbook, but she did more than that. She proved that understanding beats perfection every time." The Varaxian Supreme Commander shifted, its crystalline form emanating patterns of discomfort. They had learned, painfully, that humans could read their emotional states through these involuntary geometric displays. "Your empire has conquered 1,000 worlds," Rebecca continued, all of them following predictable patterns of resistance. "But humans?" She smiled, the expression both fierce and proud. "We don't just break patterns, we transform them into weapons." The display shifted, showing highlights of the war. Wheeler's drift squadrons dancing through space, Martinez's shield breakers turning perfect defenses into perfect destruction, Thompson's gaming AIs outmaneuvering mathematical precision, and Harrison's psychological warfare shattering alien certainty. Each of these innovations came not from our military, she emphasized, but from our civilization's chaos: street racing, video games, social media, entertainment. You thought these made us primitive. Instead, they made us unbeatable. She turned to address the galaxy-wide broadcast, knowing countless species were watching. "Let this be humanity's message to the stars. We were ready to be your friends. You chose to make us your enemies. Remember this: humanity masters whatever role you force us to play." The Varaxian Supreme Commander stepped forward, its movements now lacking their former geometric precision. It had learned to add intentional imperfection to show respect for human customs. "We offer total surrender," it transmitted in both geometric patterns and human language, another concession. "The Varaxian Empire acknowledges humanity's right to exist free of our influence. We request the honor of learning from your chaos." Rebecca nodded, then delivered the final stroke. "Your request is granted, but with conditions. First, your empire will open its schools to human teachers. Your people will learn that imperfection isn't weakness. It's the source of true strength. Second, you will help us broadcast this message to every corner of the galaxy." She turned back to the cameras, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's victory. "To all those watching, Earth doesn't seek conquest. We don't demand submission. But remember this moment. Remember what happened when an empire of perfect patterns tried to conquer a species that thrives on breaking them." The ceremony concluded with an unprecedented display. The Varaxian ships, once arranged in perfect geometric formations, deliberately broke their patterns to form a chaotic honor guard around Earth's fleet. It was both a show of respect and a public acceptance of their new understanding. Later, in her private quarters, Rebecca opened a sealed message from Dr. Mitchell's personal effects. Inside, she found a simple note: "Perfect patterns make perfect targets. Humanity's strength isn't in our ability to create order from chaos, but in our ability to find victory in it." She looked out at Earth, beautiful and chaotic, rebellious and free. The war had changed both species. The Viraxians had learned the power of imperfection, while humanity had discovered that their greatest weaknesses, their unpredictability, their chaos, their constant drive to break and remake patterns, were actually their greatest strengths. "This is General Anderson to all commands," she broadcast one final time. "Let the galaxy remember, we didn't start this war, but we showed them how to end one. Choose peace with humanity. The alternative is no longer acceptable." The message would echo through the stars for generations. Don't fight humans. You might teach us exactly how to defeat you.